Studying the Kybalion isn't like reading any ordinary book. It's a mental exercise, a transformative journey, and a test of perception. This text is designed to challenge the way reality is understood, requiring more than a single read. Every time one revisits its principles, a new layer of meaning is revealed, hidden in plain sight. The book isn't just about knowledge. It's about internalizing universal truths, shifting consciousness, and applying Hermetic wisdom in daily life. One does not simply finish the Kybalion. It is experienced, absorbed, and reinterpreted as one's understanding of metaphysics, self-improvement, and transcendence deepens. True mastery of the Kybalion comes from active engagement, not passive reading. Skimming through its pages won't unlock the 7 universal laws. Only deep reflection and practical application will. Consider the principle of mentalism, which states that the universe is mental. What does that mean in practice? If all of existence is a product of mind, how does one alter perception to reshape reality? These questions aren't meant to be rhetorical. They are meant to be lived. The Kybalion isn't just about absorbing Hermetic philosophy. It's about testing it against one's own existential crisis, material struggles, and spiritual development. To truly understand the depth of Hermetic teachings, one must explore not just the words, but the context behind them. The text carries echoes of Egyptian wisdom, Platonic ideals, and esoteric teachings that demand more than surface-level interpretation. Hermes Trismegistus, the legendary figure behind the Kybalion, did not simply present philosophical concepts. He encoded symbolic interpretations of reality. By approaching the text with an open yet discerning mind, one begins to recognize patterns that bridge classical philosophy, mysticism, and modern existential thought. Another key aspect of studying the Kybalion is understanding that wisdom evolves with the mind that perceives it. One may read it today and interpret it one way, only to return months later and see a completely different truth within the same words. That's because perception is dynamic. What seemed like abstract metaphysics at first might later feel like a practical guide to personal transformation. The book is not changing. The mind of the reader is expanding, allowing for higher levels of consciousness to grasp what was previously unseen. Ultimately, the Kybalion is more than a book. It is a living philosophy, a key to unlocking the deeper nature of spirit, soul, and body. The study of this text is an exercise in enlightenment, requiring both intellect and intuition. To approach it with rigid materialism is to miss its essence entirely. Instead, one must embrace the idea that truth is layered, that the mind is both the creator and the perceiver of reality, and that divine principles are only revealed to those willing to transcend surface understanding. And as the text unfolds, so does a larger realization, the interconnectedness of all wisdom, bound by the whole. Chapter 1. The significance of Kybalion and its core message. At first glance, the Kybalion might seem like just another esoteric book, but those who truly engage with its Hermetic philosophy understand that it is a blueprint for reality itself. It is not a mere intellectual exercise. It is a guide to mental transmutation, a process that shifts perception, consciousness, and identity. Rooted in the teachings of Hermes Trismegistus, the book introduces the 7 universal laws, which govern both the spiritual and material worlds. These principles are not theoretical abstractions. They are the fabric of existence, hidden in plain sight, operating whether one is aware of them or not. To read the Kybalion without absorbing its metaphysical depth is to miss the point entirely. One of the book's most powerful messages is the responsibility of preserving and transmitting knowledge. Throughout history, true wisdom has been safeguarded by those who recognize its value, passed down through oral traditions, secret societies, and sacred texts. This is why the Kybalion speaks to a select few rather than the masses. It is not for passive readers, but for seekers willing to question reality itself. To simply own this knowledge is meaningless. It must be understood, practiced, and embodied. As Hermes Trismegistus himself suggested, wisdom is not something to be hoarded. It is a force to be wielded for transformation, self-improvement, and the pursuit of universal truth. Beyond its Egyptian wisdom, the Kybalion also connects to other esoteric traditions, including Kabbalah, alchemy, and Platonic philosophy. The parallels are undeniable, whether it's the Kabbalistic tree of life, the Hermetic axiom, as above, so below, or Plato's concept of eternal forms. All of them point to the same universal structure. The book serves as a philosophical bridge, revealing that no matter the tradition, all spiritual paths converge at the same ultimate truth. The 7 universal laws act as keys, unlocking deeper insights that transcend the limitations of time, culture, and religious dogma. What makes the Kybalion so enduring is its emphasis on spiritual legacy over material inheritance. Wealth, power, and social status are fleeting, but wisdom is eternal. History proves this. Great empires rise and fall. Fortunes are made and lost, but philosophical and mystical teachings endure. The individual who masters the art of perception and understands the mechanics of reality wields something far greater than money. True spiritual development is not about escaping the material world. It is about mastering it through knowledge, using conscious awareness to navigate the illusions of existence. Ultimately, the Kybalion is not just a book, it is a threshold. It is an invitation to see beyond the transient illusions of everyday life and into the mechanics of the cosmos itself. Those who grasp its message come to realize that reality is not something that happens to them. It is something they shape through consciousness, will, and understanding. And as one delves deeper into its mysteries, a new question arises. If knowledge is the greatest inheritance, what does that mean for the way we live, learn, and evolve? Chapter 2. The concept of knowledge as the greatest inheritance. If there is one thing history teaches time and time again, it is that material wealth is fleeting, but wisdom endures. Gold can be stolen, empires collapse, and fortunes vanish overnight. But knowledge, once acquired, cannot be taken away. The Kybalion reinforces this truth by emphasizing that the greatest inheritance one can leave behind is wisdom, transformation, and an understanding of the universal laws. The world is full of people chasing financial security, believing that material stability will bring happiness, yet they ignore the inner riches that shape a life of true purpose. To leave behind spiritual and intellectual wealth is to leave something imperishable, a legacy that continues to unfold long after the physical body is gone. Many seek security in possessions, yet history has shown that even kings and conquerors have died in misery despite their treasures. Hermeticism teaches that real security does not come from what is owned, but from what is understood. A person who masters perception, consciousness, and mental transmutation is wealthier than someone with vast riches but no self-awareness. Consider a scenario. An individual who loses all their money but possesses deep knowledge of human nature, strategy, and resilience will rebuild their fortune. But someone who inherited wealth without wisdom will soon squander it. This is why self-improvement, esoteric teachings, and spiritual development hold more value than any physical asset. The Kybalion echoes Platonic ideals about human growth and justice. Plato's Republic spoke of the philosopher king, an individual who rules not for power, but because they have mastered wisdom and virtue. This same principle applies to personal life. Those who truly understand the nature of reality are best equipped to navigate its challenges. A person who understands the whole, the unity behind all things, lives in alignment with divine principles and does not seek fleeting pleasures. Knowledge leads to balance, balance leads to justice, and justice leads to harmony. In modern society, there's an obsession with leaving a legacy in the form of material success, but how many stop to consider what truly lasts? Think of Hermes Trismegistus, Pythagoras, and the sages of ancient Egypt. Their physical bodies turned to dust long ago, yet their wisdom still transforms minds today. The true inheritance of the Kybalion is not just the transmission of ideas, but the awakening of consciousness. Each individual who understands its message becomes a living link in the chain of knowledge, carrying forward something greater than themselves. Ultimately, the pursuit of wisdom, perception, and higher understanding is the greatest gift one can cultivate and share. What would the world look like if people valued self-mastery and enlightenment as much as they valued money? The teachings of the Kybalion suggest that those who seek universal truth will always be guided toward abundance, not necessarily in material wealth, but in something far greater. And this leads to the next realization. If humans are always searching for meaning, what exactly are they trying to find? Chapter 3. The Universal Human Search for Meaning. Since the dawn of civilization, humans have looked beyond the material world, sensing that there is something more. No matter the time, culture, or belief system, one truth remains: the human soul craves meaning. Whether through religion, philosophy, or mysticism, people have sought to define the whole, the source of all existence. The Kybalion aligns with this ancient pursuit, revealing that behind every visible reality, there is an invisible structure, a deeper truth shaping all things. The restlessness people feel, the existential crisis that haunts even the most successful, is simply a call to look beyond the surface and seek unity with the eternal. This relentless search manifests in different ways. Some seek wisdom through classical philosophy, drawn to the teachings of Plato and Aristotle, while others turn to spirituality, mysticism, or modern psychology. Even those who chase material success are, in reality, searching for a sense of fulfillment, control, or transcendence. They just don't recognize it. The Kybalion suggests that this longing is tied to the desire to overcome time and space, to reach something beyond the limitations of the physical world. Whether one calls it God, the whole, or universal consciousness, the search remains the same: to find permanence in an impermanent world. This is why religious traditions have always revolved around the eternal. Whether it is the Kabbalistic concept of Ein Sof, the infinite, the Hindu Brahman, or the Hermetic idea of the all, the message is clear. Reality is not just what is seen, it is also what is unseen. The material world is temporary, but the spirit seeks eternity. Many suffer because they place their faith in things that inevitably fade: relationships, careers, money. They believe these things will provide meaning, but when they collapse, they are left with nothing. The solution is not to reject the material world, but to perceive it through a higher lens, recognizing that true fulfillment comes from understanding the deeper structure beneath it all. Understanding this search for meaning changes how one approaches life. If everything in the material world is transient, then why cling to illusions? Instead of chasing what perishes, one can align with universal truth, seek knowledge, and cultivate spiritual development. This is what the Kybalion teaches: not an escape from reality, but a mastery of perception, so that one navigates existence with wisdom rather than confusion. The secret is to stop looking outward for meaning and start recognizing the divine within. The desire for unity with the eternal is not just an abstract idea. It is the foundation of every human longing. And the deeper one studies Hermetic wisdom, the clearer it becomes that meaning is not something to be found outside oneself. Rather, it is something to be remembered, awakened, and realized. But if the whole is truly infinite, then how can it ever be understood without placing human limitations on the divine? Chapter 4. The Egyptian concept of the whole as God. The ancient Egyptians understood something that many modern minds struggle to grasp. God is beyond definition. Any attempt to name, categorize, or confine the divine immediately limits it, turning the infinite into something finite. This is why the Kybalion refers to the supreme reality as the whole, a concept that transcends religious and philosophical labels. In Hermetic philosophy, the whole represents the unbreakable unity behind all existence, the mind, spirit, and force from which everything emerges. It is not an entity in the way people imagine gods. It is the foundation of all being, present in all things, yet beyond all things. This approach is not new. Ancient civilizations, from Egypt to Greece to India, recognized that to define God is to impose human limitations on the divine. The more one tries to explain the whole, the further they stray from its essence. In Hinduism, the idea of Brahman reflects this same principle. It is neither personal nor impersonal, neither here nor there, yet it is the only true reality. In classical philosophy, thinkers like Plato struggled with similar questions, contemplating the nature of eternity, unity, and the absolute. The Kybalion aligns with this tradition, insisting that true wisdom comes not from claiming to understand the whole, but from realizing that its nature exceeds human comprehension. This is why Hermes Trismegistus was careful in how he referred to the divine. He understood that symbols, names, and doctrines often become traps, causing people to mistake the finger pointing to the moon for the moon itself. Throughout history, religious traditions have suffered from this very error, mistaking the representation of God for God itself. People divide into sects, argue over doctrine, and even go to war over interpretations of something that can never be fully captured in words. This is why the Kybalion teaches symbolic interpretation, to look beyond literal meanings and recognize that all traditions are merely different perspectives of the same universal truth. So how does one approach the whole without distorting it? The answer lies in perception, consciousness, and transcendence. Instead of trying to define the whole, one must seek unity with it. This means shifting the focus from intellectual debate to direct experience, from dogma to realization. Meditation, contemplation, and the study of Hermetic wisdom help in this process, not because they explain the whole, but because they remove the illusions that prevent one from perceiving it. Just as a drop of water is part of the ocean, the soul is part of the whole, but realizing this truth requires breaking free from the distractions of materialism and ego. If the whole is eternal, boundless, and indivisible, then how can humans, who exist in a world of change and limitation, ever grasp it? This is the great paradox of spirituality. The human mind craves stability, yet everything in the physical world is in constant motion. The struggle between transience and permanence is at the heart of all philosophy, mysticism, and self-discovery. And it is precisely this struggle that pushes one toward the next great realization. If everything is always changing, then what is truly real? Chapter 5. The philosophical struggle between transience and permanence. The human mind is always searching for something solid to hold on to, a truth that won't fade, a reality that won't shift. But here lies the great paradox. Everything in the material world is in motion, yet the soul craves permanence. This is why people fear change, why they cling to identities, relationships, and beliefs, even when they no longer serve them. The Kybalion teaches that all things are subject to transformation, and resisting this truth only leads to suffering. The principle of vibration reveals that nothing is truly at rest. Even the most stable object is composed of atoms in constant motion. If change is the only certainty, then wisdom is not about resisting it, but about understanding how to move with it. This struggle between the temporary and the eternal defines the human condition. Philosophers, mystics, and sages throughout history have tried to anchor themselves in something beyond the physical world. Plato sought the realm of eternal forms. Buddhists speak of nirvana, and Hermeticism teaches that true stability is found only in the whole. The body, identity, and external world are all in flux, but consciousness, when properly developed, can glimpse the unchanging reality beneath the illusion. But how does one do this? The answer lies in mental transmutation, the ability to shift perception and align with timeless truths rather than getting lost in the turbulence of daily existence. One of the greatest causes of existential anxiety is the lack of certainty. People want guarantees, a career that will always be stable, a relationship that will never end, a belief system that answers all questions. But the Kybalion reminds us that the only true foundation is wisdom itself. A person who understands the 7 universal laws does not panic when life changes. Instead, they adapt, knowing that reality is always in motion. This is the difference between someone who is spiritually centered and someone who is at the mercy of external circumstances. When one recognizes the unity of all things, they stop fearing change, because they understand that beneath all transformation, the whole remains. In practical terms, this means learning how to anchor oneself in consciousness rather than external conditions. Meditation, self-inquiry, and the study of Hermetic philosophy allow one to develop a deeper sense of inner stability. Instead of identifying with fleeting emotions, desires, or possessions, a person aligned with the Kybalion focuses on the underlying principles that govern all existence. This is not about detachment in the sense of ignoring life, but about engaging with it from a position of wisdom. When one stops expecting the external world to provide permanence, they start discovering a deeper truth that does not fade. This realization naturally leads to an even deeper question. If all of life is in constant motion, then how does one make sense of the chaos? The answer lies in the very thing that causes discomfort, the feeling of existential angst, which is not a burden, but a doorway to wisdom. Because only those who question reality can ever truly understand it. Chapter 6. Existential Angst as a Path to Wisdom. Few things are as unsettling as realizing that everything once thought to be stable is, in fact, fragile. This moment, where one questions existence itself, is often feared, but the Kybalion suggests that existential angst is not a curse. It is an awakening. To feel discomfort with the world, as it is, means that one is starting to see beyond the illusions of material existence. This is why philosophy begins not with answers, but with questions. From Socrates to Hermes Trismegistus, true seekers have always embraced doubt, not as a weakness, but as a sign that the mind is breaking free from conditioned beliefs. Those who never question remain trapped. Those who do unlock a doorway to wisdom. The chaotic nature of life is often seen as a problem, but what if it is actually the key to self-discovery? Imagine someone who suddenly loses their job, their relationship, or their belief system. While the initial reaction is panic, those who understand Hermetic wisdom recognize an opportunity, because it is precisely in these moments that old patterns dissolve, allowing for transformation, self-improvement, and deeper consciousness. The Kybalion teaches that mental transmutation is the secret to navigating these moments. Instead of resisting discomfort, One can use it as fuel to elevate their perception, asking, "What is this situation teaching me? Where is the hidden lesson?" This is where the analogy of the princess and the pea becomes relevant. In a classic tale, a true princess is identified by her sensitivity to a small disturbance beneath layers of comfort. Likewise, those who experience existential discomfort are not weaker. They are more spiritually aware. They feel the weight of reality pressing against their soul because their consciousness is attuned to deeper truths. While others numb themselves with distractions, chasing money, entertainment, or temporary pleasures, the seeker leans into the discomfort and asks, "What is beyond this?" This is the difference between spiritual stagnation and enlightenment. But what does one do with this awareness? It is not enough to simply recognize the illusion of material life. One must actively seek universal truth. This means diving deeper into Hermetic philosophy, classical metaphysics, and esoteric teachings. It means questioning the nature of perception, reality, and consciousness itself. A person experiencing existential uncertainty is actually in the perfect position to reconstruct their understanding of the world, not based on societal conditioning, but on timeless wisdom. They are given the rare chance to reshape their identity in alignment with divine principles. So instead of fearing existential angst, one should welcome it. It is a signal that the soul is outgrowing its old limitations, moving toward a higher level of awareness. And those who follow this path inevitably come to the next realization. If reality itself is uncertain, then how have human beings evolved in their understanding of what is real? The answer lies in the history of human thought, a journey that stretches from the spiritual insights of ancient Egypt to the illusions of the modern world. Chapter 7. The Evolution of Human Thought on Reality. Humanity has not always perceived reality the way it does today. In ancient Egypt, the spiritual plane was considered the true reality, while the physical world was seen as a temporary reflection of something higher. The material realm was understood as a shadow, a fleeting illusion cast by the divine mind of the whole. Contrast this with modern thinking, where most people believe that only what can be measured and touched is real. This shift, from seeing reality as spiritual to seeing it as purely material, is one of the most profound changes in human consciousness. But was it an evolution or a limitation? The Kybalion suggests that the deeper truth has never changed. Only the way humans perceive it has. This transformation in thought can be clearly seen in Plato's allegory of the cave. Imagine a group of people chained inside a cave, watching shadows on the wall, believing them to be reality. One day, one of them escapes and sees the world outside for the first time, realizing that what he thought was real was only a distorted projection. This is exactly what the Kybalion describes. Most people live trapped in sensory perception, believing only in what their five senses tell them. But true wisdom requires looking beyond physical appearances, understanding that the universe operates on deeper, unseen principles. Over time, human thought moved away from eternal truths and became obsessed with sensory-based reality. The Hermetic teachings of Egypt, the esoteric wisdom of Greece, and the mystical insights of the East were gradually replaced by scientific materialism, where only what is provable is considered valid. While science has brought great advancements, it has also led many to reject the existence of a higher order. The modern world encourages people to chase fleeting pleasures and distractions, keeping them locked in the illusion of the physical realm, unaware that mind, perception, and consciousness shape reality itself. The result? People feel more lost than ever. Depression, anxiety, and existential crisis have become common struggles because humanity has disconnected from the deeper truths that once guided it. When one believes that life has no higher purpose beyond survival and consumption, a spiritual emptiness takes over. But the Kybalion reminds us that reality is not limited to what can be seen or measured. It is shaped by the universal laws that govern all existence. And those who understand these principles can break free from the cave, awakening to a world of higher perception and deeper truth. So, if modern perception of reality is flawed, what is actually real? The Kybalion provides a clear answer. Only what is eternal is truly real, while all that is temporary is illusion. But how does one distinguish between the two? The key lies in understanding the nature of permanence and change, recognizing that truth does not fade, while illusions come and go. And that brings us to the next crucial realization, the distinction between reality and illusion. Chapter 8. The distinction between reality and illusion. If there is one fundamental lesson in the Kybalion, it is this: what is eternal is real, and what is temporary is illusion. Yet, most people live as though the opposite were true. They anchor their identities in fleeting experiences, material possessions, and external validation, never questioning whether these things have any real substance. But what happens when these things disappear? When wealth fades, relationships end, and circumstances change, what remains? This is the question that separates those who seek wisdom from those who remain trapped in illusion. The Kybalion teaches that true reality exists beyond time, beyond form, and beyond the limitations of perception. The search for permanence is at the core of all spiritual and philosophical traditions. Ancient sages, mystics, and Hermeticists recognize that the physical world is constantly shifting, like sand slipping through one's fingers. The Egyptians, Greeks, and Hindus all arrived at the same understanding. Behind the ever-changing veil of existence lies an unchanging essence. This is what the Kybalion calls the whole, that which is eternal, indivisible, and beyond illusion. Those who understand this cease to be controlled by circumstances, because they recognize that reality is not what appears, but what endures. Modern society, however, thrives on illusion. People are conditioned to value the temporary over the timeless, chasing trends, entertainment, and validation that vanish as quickly as they come. This is why materialism has led to widespread existential crisis, because it places faith in things that do not last. Someone who believes their worth is tied to wealth, status, or external approval is building their identity on a foundation that will inevitably crumble. The Kybalion warns against this trap of illusion, urging individuals to anchor themselves in wisdom, truth, and higher consciousness rather than in the shifting sands of temporary pleasure. But how does one discern what is real and what is illusion? The answer lies in awareness and perception. A person who is constantly chasing distractions, emotions, and material success is lost in illusion. But one who seeks self-knowledge, enlightenment, and alignment with universal truth is moving toward reality. The key is to develop a higher perspective, to see beyond the immediate and recognize the patterns of permanence and transience. The Kybalion teaches that truth is not something external. It is something to be realized within. Once one understands the distinction between illusion and reality, the next question naturally arises: how do symbols, philosophy, and religious traditions guide one toward truth? After all, throughout history, humanity has relied on spiritual symbols and teachings to make sense of existence. But what happens when those symbols are mistaken for reality itself? This is where the true role of philosophy, religion, and symbolism becomes clear. Chapter 9. The relationship between philosophy, religion, and symbols. Throughout history, symbols have been used to communicate truths that words alone cannot express. From the Ankh of Egypt to the Taoist yin-yang, from the Christian cross to the Hermetic caduceus, these symbols are not the truth itself. but rather gateways to deeper understanding. The Kybalion warns against mistaking the symbol for what it represents, a mistake that has led to fanaticism, dogma, and conflict throughout history. A true philosopher does not worship the symbol, he deciphers it. The purpose of religion, philosophy, and esoteric teachings is not to trap the mind in rigid beliefs, but to awaken perception, guiding seekers toward the whole. Philosophy, at its core, is about seeking the essence behind appearances. Plato, Hermes Trismegistus, and the great mystics of every age all understood that symbols and rituals are meant to point beyond themselves. Religion, when understood correctly, serves as a structured path to truth, but when taken literally, it becomes a prison. Consider how the ancient Egyptian priests encoded Hermetic wisdom and myths, or how Buddhism uses parables to express the nature of enlightenment. These are not meant to be taken as literal history, but as esoteric teachings wrapped in allegory. The unwise argue over the surface meaning, while the enlightened seek the message hidden beneath. But what happens when symbols become corrupted? When people mistake the finger pointing at the moon for the moon itself? This is where dogmatism emerges. A symbol that once pointed to unity becomes a dividing line between belief systems. Instead of recognizing that all religious and philosophical paths originate from the same universal truth, people fall into sectarianism, exclusivity, and spiritual ego. The Kybalion warns against this. Any system that leads to division instead of unity has lost its connection to the whole. If God, truth, and wisdom are truly universal, then any genuine path should lead to fraternity and understanding, not separation and conflict. The great philosophers and mystics have always encouraged symbolic interpretation rather than blind faith. Hermes Trismegistus, the Kabbalists, the Sufis, and the alchemists all understood that reality cannot be forced into rigid definitions. To approach the whole, one must learn to read beyond the surface, beyond literal interpretations, and into the essence of things. This is why the Kybalion teaches that truth must be experienced, not merely believed. Intellectual understanding alone is not enough. Wisdom must be lived, tested, and applied. And this naturally leads to the next realization. If truth is unity, then why does humanity continue to fragment itself? Why do people cling to divisions when the nature of reality itself is oneness? The answer lies in the struggle between unity and fragmentation, and how one's level of spiritual development determines whether they act as a force of separation or of harmony. Chapter 10. The Importance of Unity and Avoiding Fragmentation. One of the greatest signs of spiritual advancement is the ability to see unity where others see division. The Kybalion makes it clear that the whole is one, yet humanity continuously fragments itself across religions, philosophies, ideologies, and identities. This division is not natural. It is a symptom of limited perception. The more one evolves, the more they recognize that all paths lead to the same truth. Whether through Hermeticism, Kabbalah, Eastern mysticism, or classical philosophy, the goal is always the same: to transcend illusion and reconnect with universal truth. Any system that promotes separation instead of unity is flawed, because it contradicts the very nature of the whole. This is why the Kybalion warns against religious exclusivism and dogmatic thinking. Many believe that their path is the only correct one, dismissing all others as false. But how can the whole, which is infinite, be confined to a single tradition, book, or belief system? Imagine 5 blind men touching different parts of an elephant. One feels the trunk and calls it a snake, another touches the ear and calls it a fan, another the leg and calls it a tree. They all describe the same being, yet none sees the full picture. This is how fragmented perception works. Everyone holds a small piece of the truth, yet few recognize the unity behind it all. The Hermetic path does not ask one to abandon their beliefs, but to expand their perception. To reject an idea simply because it does not fit within a specific framework is to limit one's own enlightenment. The great sages, Plato, Hermes Trismegistus, Pythagoras, Lao Tzu, and the mystics of every era, all understood that truth is bigger than any one system. A true seeker of wisdom does not seek to be right, but to understand. This is why those who study the Kybalion should always ask themselves, am I moving toward unity, or am I reinforcing division? Because the answer to that question reveals whether one is evolving or stagnating. But what does unity actually mean in daily life? It does not mean agreeing with everyone or erasing differences. It means understanding that beneath all differences, there's a shared foundation. It means practicing fraternity, empathy, and wisdom in all interactions. It means recognizing that the ego thrives on separation, while the higher self thrives on connection. Those who operate from fear, pride, or insecurity will always seek to divide, while those who operate from wisdom, perception, and spiritual awareness will always seek to build bridges. This leads to an even deeper question. If the whole is infinite, then how can a human mind, which is finite, ever grasp it? This is where the struggle between knowledge and the limits of reason emerges. No matter how much one learns, there will always be truths beyond human comprehension. And this is exactly why wisdom requires humility. Chapter 11. The Challenge of Understanding the Infinite. The greatest paradox of human thought is this. How can a finite mind grasp the infinite? The whole, as described in the Kybalion, is beyond limitation, beyond form, beyond all human attempts to define it. And yet, humans persist in trying to explain, categorize, and confine it within logic. The problem is that reason itself is limited. It can only operate within the boundaries of perception. Just as the eye cannot see beyond a certain spectrum of light, the mind cannot fully comprehend what lies beyond its own nature. This is why true wisdom is not about claiming to know everything, but about recognizing how much is unknowable. Many have tried to prove or disprove God, the whole, or ultimate reality through logic, but these efforts are misguided. Mathematics, science, and philosophy, while powerful tools, are still human constructs. They operate within the framework of duality, cause and effect, and measurable limits. But the whole is before cause, beyond effect, and outside measurement. This is why the Hermetic sages never attempted to reduce it to a formula. They understood that certain truths can only be experienced, not explained. A person can describe the taste of honey, but until someone actually tastes it, the explanation remains incomplete. The divine is meant to be realized, not merely theorized. This is why the Kybalion emphasizes humility in the pursuit of knowledge. A true seeker does not cling to rigid beliefs or pretend to have all the answers. Instead, they approach wisdom as a never-ending journey, knowing that each revelation only leads to deeper mysteries. This is what separates a philosopher from a fanatic. The philosopher embraces the unknown as part of the process, while the fanatic demands absolute certainty. Those who insist on absolute definitions of God, truth, or reality inevitably fall into illusion, because they're trying to confine the infinite within the boundaries of the finite. But if the whole is beyond comprehension, does that mean all attempts at understanding are pointless? Not at all. While the mind may never fully grasp the absolute, it can learn to align with its principles. The 7 Hermetic laws serve as bridges between the known and the unknown, allowing one to operate within the universal flow rather than resist it. Just as a musician does not need to understand the physics of sound to play a masterpiece, a person does not need to intellectually grasp the whole to live in harmony with it. Wisdom is not about control, it is about alignment. And this leads to the next great insight. If reason alone is not enough, how have different cultures throughout history attempted to reach the divine? The answer lies in myths, archetypes, and spiritual intermediaries, tools that help translate the ungraspable into symbols that the human mind can relate to. But the question remains, do these myths reveal truth, or are they just another layer of illusion? Chapter 12. The Role of Myths and Intermediaries in Spiritual Understanding. Since the beginning of time, humans have sought ways to connect with the divine, and one of the most powerful tools for this has been mythology. Myths are not mere stories. They are symbolic interpretations of universal truths, encoded in ways the human mind can grasp. The Kybalion teaches that truth is beyond words, but myths act as bridges, allowing complex spiritual principles to be understood by the masses. Every civilization has used them. The Egyptians with Osiris, the Greeks with their Olympian gods, the Hindus with Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, all pointing to the same underlying reality. These figures were never meant to be taken literally. They are representations of cosmic forces, universal laws, and aspects of the whole. But myths, when misunderstood, become traps. Many people worship the symbol instead of understanding its meaning, leading to religious dogmatism, superstition, and conflict. Consider how the story of Prometheus is not just about a rebellious titan, but about the human quest for enlightenment and the cost of seeking higher knowledge. Or how the Egyptian concept of Ma'at, often depicted as a goddess, actually represents the principle of balance and cosmic justice. In the same way, the Kybalion does not present the whole as a deity with human characteristics, but as a fundamental force beyond all personifications. The mistake is not in using myths. It is in forgetting that they are merely tools to access deeper wisdom. This is why the Hermetic tradition, like classical philosophy and mystical teachings, encourages symbolic thinking. Plato's allegories, the Kabbalistic tree of life, the tarot, alchemical symbolism, all of these serve the same function: to illustrate truths that cannot be directly expressed. Just as a painting can capture emotions that words cannot, myths express spiritual realities in ways logic alone cannot reach. The Kybalion reminds us that wisdom is hidden in symbols, and those who learn to decode them gain access to timeless knowledge. The difference between an ordinary person and a philosopher is that one sees only the surface, while the other seeks what lies beneath. One of the most powerful functions of myths is that they help the human mind relate to the infinite. The whole is beyond shape, beyond time, beyond limitation, but the mind requires familiar images to process ideas. This is why spiritual traditions create deities, archetypes, and cosmic dramas, not to deceive, but to translate the ungraspable into something the mind can work with. However, the Kybalion warns that once the tool has served its purpose, one must move beyond it. A ladder is necessary to reach a higher place, but once the climb is complete, one does not continue clinging to the ladder. So if myths and symbols are gateways to truth, how does one avoid the trap of mistaking the map for the territory? The answer lies in philosophy, the ability to question, analyze, and extract essence rather than getting lost in form. And this naturally leads to the next realization. What is the true relationship between philosophy and religion, and how do they serve different yet complementary roles in understanding reality? Chapter 13. The relationship between religion and philosophy. Religion and philosophy are often seen as opposites, one based on faith and tradition, the other on reason and inquiry. But the Kybalion suggests that this division is an illusion. Both exist to guide humanity toward truth, just through different methods. Religion provides a structured path, offering symbols, rituals, and teachings to help people connect with the divine principles of the whole. Philosophy, on the other hand, strips away layers of dogma and interpretation, seeking the essence behind the teachings. When balanced, they create a complete system for spiritual development, but when misunderstood, they become sources of conflict and stagnation. The role of religion is to offer a framework for understanding reality, but this framework is only useful if it remains a tool, not a prison. The problem arises when people take spiritual teachings literally, mistaking allegory for history and symbols for absolute truth. This is why religious exclusivism is so dangerous. It assumes that one system alone holds the full truth, ignoring that all traditions point to the same fundamental principles. A person who understands the Kybalion recognizes that religious structures, when approached wisely, serve as stepping stones to higher knowledge. But they are not the final destination. They are guides leading beyond themselves. Philosophy, in contrast, is the force that keeps religion from becoming rigid. It questions, analyzes, and refines understanding, ensuring that spiritual teachings remain alive and relevant. The Greek philosophers, the Hermetic sages, and the mystics of all traditions understood that truth cannot be static. It must be rediscovered in every age, every generation, and every individual. A person who only follows religious tradition without seeking deeper understanding risks falling in a blind belief. A person who only engages in philosophy without appreciating the symbolic depth of spiritual teachings risks becoming lost in intellectualism, disconnected from lived experience. True wisdom comes from uniting both perspectives. A clear example of this balance can be seen in Plato's philosophy and Hermeticism. Plato's theory of forms suggests that the material world is a reflection of higher, eternal realities, a concept deeply aligned with the Kybalion's principle of correspondence, as above, so below. Meanwhile, Hermeticism, though often considered a spiritual tradition, is deeply philosophical in nature, constantly questioning and refining perception. When one approaches spiritual teachings philosophically, they are able to extract universal wisdom without falling into dogma. This is the essence of mental transmutation, the ability to take an information, refine it, and transform it into personal insight. This brings us to a deeper realization. If the whole is ultimately spirit, then how does one move beyond the divisions of body, soul, and mind and experience reality as a unified whole? The answer lies in understanding the relationship between these aspects and recognizing that true enlightenment comes when one stops seeing them as separate. Chapter 14. The concept of the whole as spirit. At the highest level of understanding, the whole is pure spirit, eternal, indivisible, and the source of all existence. But what does this mean in practical terms? Most people see themselves as a combination of body, mind, and soul, but the Kybalion reveals that these are not separate entities. They are different expressions of the same underlying reality. The body is the physical vessel, the soul is the individual thread of consciousness, and spirit is the unifying force that connects all things. Imagine a pearl necklace. Each pearl represents an individual life. The thread represents the soul connecting each experience, and the full thread itself is spirit, the essence of the whole. To focus only on the pearls is to miss the deeper reality that holds them together. This understanding shifts how one perceives life. If spirit is the foundation of existence, then the material world is a secondary expression, not the primary reality. This does not mean that the body and mind should be ignored. They are tools for experiencing and refining consciousness. But when one identifies too much with the temporary aspects of self, they lose sight of the eternal nature of spirit. This is why self-mastery and spiritual development are essential. They allow one to live in the material world without being controlled by it. The Kybalion teaches that spiritual awareness is not about escaping reality, but about aligning with the deeper truth that underlies it. This is also why perception dictates experience. A person who sees themselves only as a body will live in fear of death. A person who identifies only with a mind will be trapped in endless thought, unable to find peace. But a person who realizes their spirit first and foremost understands that existence is not limited to this lifetime, this form, or even this plane of reality. This is the foundation of mysticism, Hermetic wisdom, and transcendence, recognizing that one is not separate from the whole, but an expression of it. This is why the Kybalion emphasizes mental transmutation, because when perception shifts, reality itself changes. Understanding this changes everything. Suddenly, the fear of loss, death, and uncertainty loses its grip, because one sees beyond the illusion of separateness. This is the essence of enlightenment, not an abstract concept, but a direct experience of unity with all things. The journey of spiritual awakening is simply the process of removing the layers of illusion that keep one from seeing what has always been true. The whole was never hidden, it was only misunderstood. And this brings us to the final piece of the puzzle. If everything is connected, if all is one, then how do the 7 Hermetic laws fit into this grand picture? The answer is simple. They're the natural laws that govern the expression of the whole, and understanding them allows one to align with the flow of reality instead of resisting it. And this is exactly where the Kybalion takes us next. The first and most important law: the universe is mental. Chapter 15. The 7 Hermetic Laws and their foundation in the whole. At the core of the Kybalion lies a simple yet profound truth. Everything is governed by universal laws, and those who understand them can shape their reality. These 7 Hermetic principles are not arbitrary. They are the very structure of existence, flowing directly from the whole. Just as gravity governs the physical world, these laws govern the mental, spiritual, and energetic realms. They do not change, they do not bend, and they do not favor anyone. But those who learn to work with them, rather than against them, gain mastery over their own experience. This is why the Kybalion insists that wisdom is power, not power over others, but power over oneself, one's mind, and one's perception of reality. The first and most fundamental of these laws is the principle of mentalism, which states that the all is mind, the universe is mental. This means that reality is not something separate from consciousness, it is shaped by it. Just as a dream exists only within the mind of the dreamer, the universe itself is a mental construct, existing within the vast consciousness of the whole. This is the foundation of mental transmutation, the ability to shift reality by shifting perception. The implications are staggering. If the universe is mental, then thought is not passive, it is creative. Every belief, every emotion, every expectation is shaping the world one experiences. This explains why different people can live in completely different realities while sharing the same world. A person who believes in scarcity, limitation, and struggle will experience life that way. Another who operates from abundance, harmony, and wisdom will shape a very different existence. The difference is not external circumstances. It is internal alignment with the laws of the universe. The Kybalion teaches that understanding the whole means understanding these laws and learning to move in accordance with them. Just as a sailor does not fight the ocean but learns to navigate its currents, those who understand Hermetic wisdom do not fight reality. They flow with it. This knowledge has been preserved for centuries, hidden in mystical traditions, sacred texts, and esoteric teachings. But now, more than ever, humanity is at a crossroads. Will people continue to live as victims of an unseen system, or will they learn to master it? This is why the study of the Kybalion is not just theoretical, it is practical. It is the key to understanding self-improvement, consciousness, and transformation. The laws do not care whether one believes in them or not. They operate regardless. But those who study them gain the ability to co-create with the universe instead of merely reacting to it. And this is exactly where the journey leads next. A deep exploration of the principle of mentalism, the first law of Hermetic philosophy, and the key to unlocking reality itself. Because once one understands that everything is mental, everything is perception, then the next logical question emerges. If the universe is a construct of mind, then how can one begin to reshape it consciously? Conclusion. What are you going to do with this knowledge? Now that you've seen how the Kybalion unveils the hidden structure of reality, the real question is, how much of your reality is shaped by limiting beliefs, unconscious habits, and external conditioning? Because knowing the truth is not enough, you have to apply it. If everything is mental, if the universe operates by universal laws, then your next step is clear. Start using them to reshape your perception, your choices, and your life. Think about it. If the whole is eternal, unified, and beyond illusion, why are so many people trapped in division, fear, and uncertainty? The answer is simple. They don't realize they are the architects of their own experience. But now you do. So I'll ask you again, what will you do with this knowledge? Will you let it fade as another piece of information? Or will you use it to break free from illusion and move toward higher consciousness? If you're serious about mastering mental transmutation, universal truth, and self-improvement, then this is just the beginning. The 7 Hermetic laws are not just theories, they are tools. And in the next discussions, we'll break them down one by one, so you can start applying them in your life immediately. So, if you want to keep unlocking the secrets of Hermetic wisdom, esoteric teachings, and higher perception, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because what's coming next will take this to an even deeper level. The question isn't whether these principles work. They've always been operating. The question is whether you'll use them to your advantage or keep ignoring them. The choice is yours.